Okay, I'm just gonna come out and say it. The internet's current perspective on the newer Zelda games is just wrong. These games may be different, but that doesn't make them not Zelda games. Because Zelda games are always striving to be different. It's just more apparent now. And I kind of want to point out that there's less difference between this and this than you would think. But first, I guess I need to give a little background into the series. The original Legend of Zelda game was an action-adventure game, a genre that usually focuses on defeating enemies and solving puzzles, typically going through a dungeon to complete a quest or obtain treasure, and vanquishing evil is usually in the equation. And the Zelda series, in my opinion, was the pioneer of this type of game, starting with the first one. You begin the game and see a little cave, and with your adventurous spirit, you walk in and are told the classic line, "It's dangerous to go alone, take this," and you're given a wooden sword and sent on your way. And from then on, you explore this massive open world to complete your quest of securing the pieces of the Triforce, defeating Ganon, and saving Princess Zelda, solving puzzles and defeating monsters in dungeons along the way. This, at its core, is what I would call a traditional Zelda experience, because the series has followed this formula to this day. But the internet seems to have a perception that this has changed in recent years, and we're no longer getting traditional Zelda games, due to the massive changes to the traditional formula. And this notion began with Breath of the Wild. Often regarded as one of the best open world games and one of the best Zelda games in years, due to its beautiful open world filled with quests to go on and beautiful vistas to explore. The whole game is just the definition of quality. This game was inviting not only to Zelda fans, but newcomers too. With new survival mechanics, the ability to go wherever you want, whenever you want, and however you want, with complete freedom, and a completely reworked formula. This game changed the Zelda series forever. Or did it? No, it didn't. Which is why I'm making this thing you're watching. My goal here, essentially, is to point out that just because the newer Zelda games play differently than most of the series, doesn't mean they're not traditional experiences. They're just evolving. Breath of the Wild is actually as close to the original game we've ever gotten since the original game. I never realized this until I heard a YouTuber mention that there's similarities. I believe it was King K, but I'm not 100% sure on that. You start the game, walk out into the open, and you're assisted by a wise elderly man, and after the tutorial, you're given your quest. Defeat Calamity Ganon, and save Princess Zelda. Along the way, solving puzzles, defeating monsters, and exploring dungeons. The only thing that has changed is the scope of it all. In fact, when people say that the survival gameplay takes away from the series by stripping it of its puzzle solving and dungeon spelunking roots, they're wrong. These mechanics enhanced what was already built into the series. Exploration, adventure, everything you lay your eyes on in Hyrule is accessible to you. All you have to do is go there. There's still a puzzle element here. The new puzzle for you to solve is how are you going to get to these new places? You want to get to that shrine that's atop a snowy mountain? Okay, sounds fun. Let's go. This presents our new puzzle to solve. Our new challenge to overcome. How am I going to withstand the cold to reach that shrine safely? Do you just keep eating food while taking damage? Find warm clothing to keep you warm? Or cook a meal that keeps you warm for a period of time as you make your way there? All this is done is add additional elements to the overworld that create a new type of puzzle. How will I survive? What can I do to get there alive? How can I use these new tools and physics to my advantage to overcome my obstacles? And also, the series was always known for putting stupid roadblocks in your way that just keep you from getting where you want to go. That's not new at all. And Tears of the Kingdom and Echoes of Wisdom take this philosophy even further. Tears of the Kingdom was a masterclass of a sequel, taking the mechanics of Breath of the Wild and multiplying them by 10. Tears of the Kingdom makes Breath of the Wild look like a tech demo, and that is saying something. Truly stretching the limits of what is possible. And Echoes of Wisdom applies these same philosophies, but to 2D Zelda, and it works phenomenally. I also would like to preface that all three of these games are modern masterpieces in game design, giving the player all these tools and variables and essentially dropping them into one giant open world puzzle box, whereas before the newer entries, most puzzles in these games all have one definitive solution, and the player can only solve them the way the game designers want them to. These games give you the pieces, and you put together the solution yourself. It doesn't change the core design of Zelda. It's just completely in the player's hands now. You are the solution. All these things effectively add so much to what we're accustomed to in the franchise, while at the same time, they don't change a single thing. Because the series has always done this. It has constantly rewrote this Zelda formula. And this is not new. And herein lies my main point. The series has been doing this the whole time. You don't think so? Okay. We'll just go ahead and sit back for a bit, because I'm about to explain in excruciating detail why every Zelda game is a traditional Zelda game.
Gee, it sure is boring around here.
My boy, this peace is what all true warriors strive for.
Okay, maybe not all of them. Moving on. Let's start off with the most damning piece of evidence. Zelda 2 is almost a completely different type of game than the first one. It's an action RPG. Not a very good one at that. Which helps prove a point. Not even the second game in the series was consistent to the first. And this is a running theme in the series. It is constantly evolving, changing up the formula just enough to stay fresh, while remaining the same at its core. See? Zelda and Ganon are still here. Zelda 3, A Link to the Past, remedies what Zelda 2 attempted, by being a game that essentially is just an upgraded version of Zelda 1. By just improving upon what worked and making a remarkable experience. I won't spend too much time on this one, because while it was the first truly fantastic Zelda game, and it established the 7 magic people you have to save, and the Master Sword, and making a wish on the Triforce as plot points, which these things will carry over into multiple entries, it just doesn't stand out as much as the other installments in the franchise, due to its story not being super fleshed out, because it was still relatively early on in the history of gaming, and a lot of games were telling simple stories rather than super fleshed out ones. But it is still a solid experience. I love this game, regardless of if I think it's dated a little bit. It's fantastic still. But it's still consistent with the series thus far. Puzzles, Zelda, monsters, Ganon. All that checks out. So far, so good. Let's move on to Zelda 4. Link's Awakening was the next game in the series, and is well known for being one of the Zelda games that stands out from its peers due to it just being different. And this is one of Link's Awakening's biggest strengths. It was the first time it was willing to push the envelope, rather than being about Link's journey through Hyrule, Link being the same guy from A Link to the Past, by the way. Not the only time he returns as the protagonist either. Some running themes there. Sometimes there are sequels, but not always. This was just one of this version of Link's many adventures, being a far more personal one at that. While A Link to the Past stuck to its hero's journey roots, Awakening wanted to try something completely new, while still feeling tonally adjacent to what came before. It's just a little weird. But the way this game plays out, Link might actually be kind of an asshole this time around if you think about it. You see, in this game, Link is in a dream, and just like a dream, everything is just a bit off. Sure, your dream is about meeting a cute girl and spending time in a quaint little village with a diverse cast of weirdos and having a great old time, but your dream is also about finding all of the magical instruments that will wake a mystical being called the Windfish that conjured up this whole island, making this dream that Link finds himself in. Link has to wake this guy up so he can escape from the dream, but doing so causes all the people of this little island of Koholint to be wiped from existence. Yeah, that's a little different than saving Zelda and defeating Ganon, isn't it? No, not really. Yeah, your end goal is a little different this time around, but Link's whole reasoning for escaping the dream is that he can go back to the real world and continue his adventures fighting evildoers, and all the while solving puzzles and fighting monsters. So like I said, different, but consistent. What about after Link's Awakening? What comes next? Oh, just a game you may have heard about through the grapevine, might have seen a video or two about it, or review scores, or anything really about it. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, one of the most critically acclaimed video games ever made. Ocarina of Time brought the series into the third dimension. Not only was this game groundbreaking in the action-adventure genre, it was one of the first truly groundbreaking stories in a video game, it also established some new elements that would trickle down into the games that came after it, like locking onto enemies for more precise attacks, a noble animal buddy, new traversal options, and a helpful guide character that can give you hints and deduce enemy weaknesses. And not only that, Zelda is an actual character that holds actual agency for the first time in the series.
You've killed me!
Good.
No, not that one. That one doesn't, it wasn't the first time. That does not count. And I feel like I'm forgetting something. I just can't put my finger on it. Oh yeah! This was the first game to introduce Ganon's human form. The Great King of Evil, Ganondorf. For the first time, Ganon is actually more than just a big evil pig monster. Now he's a conniving world leader that manipulates events in his favor. Also, his plan comes to fruition, and he actually nearly ends the world. He's just a presence that looms over the game. From the first time you see him, you know this guy means business. And Link this time around goes into a magical stasis for 7 years so he can defeat Ganondorf in the future now that he can finally wield the Master Sword, the Blade of Evil's Bane, returning from earlier in the series. And you go back and forth through time with the power of hindsight, aka causing a time paradox. Sorry, windmill guy. Even with all these new additions and ideas, it's still pretty tonally consistent with the stuff you do before. I believe this is where fans began to accept that this was the golden standard. This is where tradition was established. Solving puzzles in dungeons, fighting evil, saving Zelda, and challenging Ganondorf in an almost rival-like fight. All the same stuff, just on a much grander scale. So with this new golden standard in place, what was the sequel to Ocarina of Time like? How did you follow up what was genre defining? How do you even go from there? The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask is drastically different from Ocarina of Time. No Ganon.
I see you peacefully. You're in your dreams. Everything seems calm and free. I know.
No saving Zelda. No Hyrule. Hell, this one only has 4 temples, whereas Ocarina of Time had 7. This game is actually primarily side quest focused, telling more personal stories of the people of Termina. And Link is just doing what any hero should do. Lending a helping hand to these people. Kind of a more friendly neighborhood hero of time. And if you thought Awakening was weird, boy are you in for a surprise. And before you assume anything, this game still involves you tackling an ancient evil and preventing doomsday by solving puzzles and fighting monsters. It's just a little different this time. Instead of Ganondorf, you fight a kid with abandonment issues. I swear Link is the good guy. But all that stuff isn't the main focus. The game is more concerned with world building. All of the characters in this game have schedules, lives, and personalities of their own. Another thing the series keeps consistent from here on. Memorable, recurring characters. You want proof? Tangle. I also forgot to mention that Majora's Mask, just like Ocarina of Time, does time travel. And ironically, kind of does it better. You're traveling back to the beginning of the 3-day cycle way more often than you go back and forth between Time and Ocarina of Time. Even though the games are drastically different, they do share that one common factor in the importance of time travel. And I forgot to mention that in my script, so I had to add it in post. Also, I'm sick, so that's why this part sounds kind of worse in comparison. Are you seeing a pattern here? Every other game is trying something new, thinking outside of the box, and taking ideas that work and stuffing them into the next adventure. And the next major game in the series, and one of my personal favorites, The Wind Waker, tries something completely different, having the majority of the game be a massive adventure on the high seas. You're doing all the same stuff, but in a new way, sailing to islands and discovering the many secrets of the world by just exploring to your heart's content. Doesn't that ring a bell? And furthermore, bringing back old ideas. Ganondorf is still a cold, calculated, evil presence, waiting to take back a world he believes is rightfully his. Yeah, he's the same guy from Ocarina of Time. Another recurring thing. And speaking of recurring things, Tingle is back, and he's a convicted felon.
Mama, I'm a criminal. Mama,
I'm a criminal, criminal. Mama, I'm a criminal. Mama, I'm a criminal.
More concepts and characters carry over from here too. Beetle is a character that's a merchant, and he is in many different games. He's in Skyward Sword, and Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom, and he charges too much for all the shit that he sells you.
Watch out!
Sorry, got carried away. And the sky from Skyward Sword is this massive landscape where you go to these different islands. They're straight up islands in the sky. Very similar to the Great Sea from this game. And the Toon art style. This carries over into Wind Waker sequels and even some games that aren't even connected to Wind Waker. The franchise continues to just absorb key elements into one big Zelda sponge. Okay, further illustrating my point, I'm going to say all of the new ideas and things that happen in the series with the rest of the games that I can think of in as quickly of a fashion as I possibly can. So bear with me. Just let me try this. Oracle of Ages and Seasons are two games that connect together via a password system, allowing you to continue your journey from one game into the next, one focusing more on puzzles and the other focusing more on combat, while still having elements from the earlier entries. Link goes on a journey outside of Hyrule and vanquishing an ancient evil, just like how Link leaves Hyrule in Majora's Mask and Link's Awakening, another element that gets carried over. The Minish Cap is a game pretty similar to the majority of the games, but this time, Link shrinks down to the size of an ant to experience a whole new perspective on the world around him, and also, becoming small and experiencing the world through a whole new perspective than you're used to is kind of similar to how going back and forth between time periods in Ocarina of Time works. Changing perspective, another element carried over. Oh yeah, and obviously you gotta stop an evil guy from taking over Hyrule. This time, it's not Ganondorf, it's Vati. He becomes a recurring villain. In Four Swords, a Zelda game where you're fighting dungeons and solving monsters, and bing bong, Vati is back! But this time it's co-op. Then you have Twilight Princess. This one is a sequel to Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, and a lot of people say this one is too similar to Ocarina of Time, but I thought that was what people wanted. After all, Wind Waker was criticized at the time for being too different, and the art style was being too cartoony. But Twilight Princess can't be too similar, because this time Link turns into a wolf, and it completely changes how Link controls, while still remaining consistent to the control scheme of the games before. But once again, switching things up just a bit. And look who's back! It's Ganondorf! And who do you save? Princess Zelda! And oh my sweet god, Midna is gorgeous. Then there's Phantom Hourglass, the first sequel to Wind Waker. Look at that, another sequel. Even having the same characters in this one. And this time, you're sailing on the high seas, once again, in a land outside Hyrule. Look, a place that's not Hyrule. Let's try something different. Again. Only this time, you play the game with your DS stylus. And the third game in the Wind Waker series is Spirit Tracks. This does the same stylus thing too, only this time you ride a little choo-choo train. So now we're even experimenting with different goofy control schemes. Let's see what sticks, fellas. Let's see what can get into the sponge. Then Skyward Sword was next. Another game trying a gimmicky control scheme. This time, it's motion controls. And it ends with you getting the Master Sword and vanquishing an ancient evil again. Next is A Link Between Worlds, a game that has pretty much the same map from A Link to the Past, but it's different this time. You can go into walls, completely changing your perspective on the world, just like Minish Cap. And there's Ganon again! And finally, we have Triforce Heroes, another 2D Zelda game, only this time it's multiplayer again! Just like Four Swords! Okay. Alright. Catch my breath. I'm done. But you know what all these games have in common? That marvelous sense of discovery and adventure that never changes. It's called The Legend of Zelda. It's in the title. As long as these games feel like a legend unfolding before my very eyes, that is what is most important. That it feels like a legend. And to me, that has never changed. Let's wrap this up. In the final moments of The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, the King of Hyrule uses the Triforce to make a wish, something that happens many times in the series before. Only this time, it's a little different. Rather than saving Hyrule from being a submerged, long-forgotten kingdom underwater, he wishes to keep Hyrule flooded and have the water fill the land once more, along with him, the Master Sword, and the Ganondorf stuck to it, and leaves the future to Link and Tetra, abandoning the tradition, realizing there's no further need for it, while Ganondorf is unwilling to let go of the past and move on to better things, similar to how a lot of Zelda fans are not willing to embrace change. And this game has done nothing but defy tradition the whole time. Link this time isn't even the reincarnation of the hero's spirit like usual. He's just a kid who stepped up and earned the mantle of the hero. The world isn't a massive green landscape. It's a vast open sea. We don't put the Master Sword back to rest in the stone, leaving it behind for someone else to come and get later. We leave it behind, and we move on. And the crazy thing is, all of these absences of tradition are about as traditional to Zelda as it gets, because the series has always been about change. We're just now bringing attention to what was already there. So if you're planning on being one of those snot gobblers that's gonna gatekeep the series because new fans are starting with these, new non-traditional Zelda games, don't. Because it doesn't matter how they got into the series. What matters is that they enjoy it. Whether you're a fan because you fell in love with Ocarina of Time or Tears of the Kingdom, the series is still the same as it's always been. An ever-changing legend.
You are a Hylian, and were always bound to leave this forest. And now you have learned your own destiny, so you know what you must do. That's right. You must kill Ron DeSantis. Link, break the...